All right. So we've got everybody here now. Welcome, everybody, to the Legends of Stoicism. So, first of all, does anybody have any questions about anything that they've seen so far in the class itself? I assume everybody has gone through and at least read a little bit of it. Okay. So, we've got I'll just do a brief introduction to what we're going to be going through then in the course and in the class series. What I really wanted to focus on in this class series was Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, mainly because it's going to be the most fruitful, I think, of everything. However, that does not necessarily mean that these other philosophers and Stoics that we're going to be studying, like Epictetus and Seneca, are necessarily going to be less fruitful. I just think that Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is going to be the most, I would say, profound of all of these, mainly because of not just the fame that it already has, but also because he was a very unique individual. Has anybody ever heard of Seneca or Epictetus, though? I'm sure everybody's heard of Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
actually not, but I am familiar with Marcus.
Okay.
I'm familiar with all of them.
Gotcha. So has anybody read?
Me too. Me too.
Okay. So has anybody read Seneca's Shortness of Life or Epictetus's The Enchiridion?
Yes, I've read them.
Okay. Anybody else?
I've just read some quotes on YouTube posts. I have not read a book.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then, great. This is going to be a fresh perspective for most everybody. I know, Philip, you said in the past that it was Stoicism that ultimately led you to your faith. And we're going to go into a little bit on why that might be the case. But why you said that you started with Stoicism? What exactly led you toward from Stoicism to where you are now? Then.
Yeah, well, I was brought up Catholic, and that just, did not work for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then during high school, I was actually dually enrolled in a community college, and I took one of the things I needed was a philosophy course, and that introduced me to it. And then just as time went by, spent a lot of time studying ancient history, and anytime I'd hear or read something, like say about from biblical history, there would be something, this prophet said this, Jesus said that, and it's like, wait a minute, I heard that before.
Mm.
So there was a lot of parallels to all of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and this is going to be something that we'll get more into today on how Stoics view God. It's actually very profound to think about, considering that, just the timing of how this came about and where their philosophy comes from and everything like that. But yeah, I took an ancient Greek philosophy class in college, and we went through Pythagoras here, which I'll start off with in a little bit when we get to the intro to Stoic mindset. But we talked about a lot of different other kinds of ancient philosophers and mathematicians and scientists that ultimately led to Stoic thought, and how faith came about, and how the similarities of Eastern philosophies as well as the Stoics, and how the Stoics derived a lot of their ideas about, for example, ataraxia, which we'll get into more a little bit here, but it's basically the equivalent of enlightenment for Eastern philosophies and religions. Lots of interesting comparisons and parallels to take place here. But the way that we are going to frame this whole class series, so obviously this is going to be the longest class series we've ever done here at the Regal Change Academy. It's going to be the 8 weeks. And each week we're going to go through something a little bit different. Obviously, this week is going to be more of an introduction and really laying the groundwork in which we can base all of the presuppositions forward for how we can maneuver through the class going forward. Then we're going to be reading Seneca's Shortness of Life over the next week, and we'll be going over that next Saturday. The Shortness of Life, I have it pulled up here actually. The Shortness of Life, it's only like 20 pages total. I mean, technically, like over here on the PDF, it's like 11 or 12, but really it's only like 20 pages, so it's pretty short. It's a fairly easy read as far as the grammar is concerned, but the ideas are very much simplified and designed to just kind of penetrate your mind in a unique way. So he's basically laying out in each of these, technically they're just verses, but you can view them as chapters as well. But in each verse or chapter that he has that's numbered here, it's basically he's going to be listing out, okay, this is what you think, this is why it's wrong. And he basically does that throughout the whole thing. So you want to make sure that as you're going through this and as you're reading this over the next week, you just make sure to keep an open mind with how these people are thinking and just the way that the translation is as well, because everything that I have available for Seneca's Shortness of Life, Epictetus's the Enchiridion, all of these are going to be in PDF form. So all of the PDF forms that I have also in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, they're going to be specific translations that you may or may not have seen before. Obviously, things are going to be a little bit shifted as far as certain phrasing or certain words. It's kind of like in the Bible study classes that we do each week. Obviously, everybody has a little bit of a different version to read from, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the ideas cannot correlate with one another or we cannot expand on them. So that's going to be something to just take note of going forward. We will be spending 1 week on Seneca's Shortness of Life, 2 weeks on Epictetus's Enchiridion, and we're going to be spending the last 4 weeks with Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Now, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is definitely the longest of all of these. Seneca's Shortness of Life is going to be the shortest. The Enchiridion is going to be the second, like in the medium, and then obviously Meditation is going to be the longest. And it's also going to be in linear order as far as the timeline goes. So Seneca, he actually was born before Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. And then we have, okay, it's finally loaded here on my screen. Yeah, so how many pages is this? Yeah, roughly like 240 maybe. So we're going to be doing a lot of reading with Marcus Aurelius down the line. Just to keep that in mind for you guys. And again, this is going to be like the last 4 weeks are going to be a little bit more vigorous as far as the reading goes. But the first few weeks here we're going to have is going to be definitely more of an introduction. And you're going to get, like the way that I designed this class was so that you can get the fresh ideas of Stoicism first, like Seneca, and then how Stoicism evolved. through time. And Epictetus was a very peculiar case because he was actually a slave, and so I've titled this "From Slave to Legend" because of just his upbringing. Seneca was completely different as well. Seneca had a very uh, prosperous and not necessarily a pompous attitude, but he began to really learn about pompousness in intellectualism as he grew up, and that's one of the reasons why he became a Stoic. Um, but Marcus Aurelius, I'm pretty sure everybody knows that he was obviously the emperor, so uh, he definitely had a different upbringing than the slave of Epictetus. Um, but that'll be how the whole class is structured. Each week, we're going to have different task sheets that you can complete on your own time as well. For example, this week we have okay, good. People are checking it out. So, for example, this week these are going to be questions that I want to be revisiting at the end of the class series, and so I want to basically compare and contrast how you've manifested what you've taken from the class and implemented it into your own life. So these are going to be the same kinds of questions that you'll have at the very end for week 8. But we're going to just see like what changes throughout the next 2 months basically of this class. So each week we're going to have a different task or different task sheet that correlates with the readings that we're going to be doing, and then also just the philosophers that we're going to be discussing as well. So, for example, in this week 1 task sheet, we're doing basic reflective questions for you. So describe the object of love and relationships from a perspective of Stoicism based on your current understanding of Stoicism. What is something you desire currently, and how do you think a Stoic would choose to act on this desire? And then list 4 distractions that keep you away from maximizing positive emotions and minimizing negative emotions. Do you currently have something you are not prepared to lose? Okay, this is something that a lot of people might think this is maybe a kind of a bizarre question. You know, well, what exactly does it mean, and what am I prepared to lose? Well, this can be people, this can be things, this can be situations. If there is something that you are not prepared to lose, then is there anything that you would want to attain that would be difficult for you to be prepared to lose? So it could be a job or a title or some kind of achievement or whatever it can be. This is going to be very open for you and something to complete on your own time. Perhaps I recommend a journal. Keeping a journal of some kind to do these kinds of questions or thoughts. Just a very specific time as well. Set aside time each week to go through these. And then finally, how can you turn your pain into helping others? This is something that the Stoics were very adamant about, is how do you turn pain into a form of servitude in the best possible way? Any questions so far? Okay. Fantastic. So there is this Stoicism free guide for anybody that just wants to have an additional source. I have put this as available for everybody, specifically the Stoic guide, but anybody that is not, oh, he must have. Hey, Daniel, where did you leave off?
No, it was my school's Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't been working the past couple of days.
Okay, gotcha. Did you have any
I'm
questions?
using my phone. No, I don't know what you guys are talking about because I got
What was the last thing you heard?
you were just getting started, to be honest. We talked about the shortness of life
Oh, okay. So you haven't, you
with
didn't even,
Seneca.
so you didn't even see this just yet?
No, but it's. I mean, I don't want you to have to redo it just because I wasn't there.
Okay. Well, so just to kind of sum up then, there will be at the bottom of each uh, weekly module, there will be resources where you can check out the task. I will only update the tasks week by week so that you can check that out. But as far as the questions go, you can check that out on your own time. Do these questions and prompts on your own time. Okay. So, and then as I was saying, also with the Stoicism free guide, if you just want an extra resource, you can check this out as well, just for anybody that might have not seen it. So, why study Stoicism? I have a list of Stoic beliefs and strategies as well as goals that the Stoics have materialized as well as actualized in their philosophy. And some of these things include things such as beliefs for it is your fault that you're unhappy, and everything is temporary. We're social beings with a social duty. Hedonism ought to be avoided. Fame and fortune are overrated, and a philosophy of life is to be lived, not thought about. Now, this is something that I learned personally from the Stoics was that the philosophy of life is to be lived, not thought about. And I thought about this because is a philosophy of life not to be thought about? Is that a philosophy in itself? I mean, I guess a philosopher would have a field day with that, but the whole point of Stoicism is to live what is true and to live what is reasonable. And that's exactly how the Stoics operate. The Stoics are absolutely not going to be for hedonism. As many of you probably know, Marcus Aurelius, even though he was an emperor, he was often among the commoners. And he would be among the commoners because he wanted to make sure he knew what it was like to just be around those kinds of people. So the whole point of Stoicism. Somebody raise their hand. Yep. Liza, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I didn't know that he would go with the commoners, Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, he was a very humble man. In all honesty, yeah. Philip.
Yeah, he was definitely out of the ordinary when it comes to Roman emperors.
Yeah, yeah. He was. He was not like any of the Roman emperors ever. Oh, are you saying something, Philip?
Yeah, he definitely was not like Caligula or Nero or anybody like that.
Daniel.
It's interesting because his son was the opposite. His son was, I believe, a Commodus or something, and he was very much like a tyrant. He abused his power and he enjoyed controlling others.
Yeah, and it was definitely the opposite of the pendulum for that to be witnessed among the people as well. But yeah, Marcus Aurelius did walk among the commoners quite frequently, and he didn't dress like an emperor oftentimes as well. He was very humble. He had a lot of humility. Probably I wouldn't say too much humility, but too much because of his place in the world. I mean, if he was not an emperor and he was doing this kind of stuff, nobody would really bat an eye. But because he was the emperor, it had a much more profound effect. And this is also one of the reasons why Epictetus, who we'll get into in a couple weeks, was so transformative in regard to the Stoic philosophy, because, again, he was a slave and he just showed immense promise, and he was somebody that nobody really saw coming. But this just goes to show that it's not about who you were meant to be. It's about who you choose to become is what matters. And that's another big thing with Stoic thoughts and beliefs is, it's your fault if you're unhappy. Absolutely. Because you can change that. You have complete control over whether or not you choose to be happy or not. And as far as the strategies go, rephrasing goals so that they are entirely in your control. This is something that I didn't start doing until the last couple years, really. I guess I never really knew how to set goals properly, which is interesting because I always knew how to set the criteria for success, but I didn't know how to rephrase the criteria for success in a way that would I didn't know how to make sure that I could rephrase the criteria for success so that it could be entirely in my control of whether or not I'm successful or not. And so if you also have goals that you want or you're thinking about achieving right now, now's a good time to reestablish those goals and reevaluate to ensure that are those goals really phrased in the way that you have complete control over how it happens and how the outcome is going to be. Now, of course, some things are going to be left entirely up to God on whether or not you choose certain things and how to act, but or how the outcome is going to be based off of how you act. But you can choose how to phrase those things so that you can ensure that you live simply. You have nothing that you're prepared to lose. Exercising self-denial and delayed self-gratification. This is another strategy that is very common among Stoics. And this is something that you see in nearly every facet of religion around the world. Think about like fasting, for example, is a good exercise of self-denial or delayed gratification. You see fasting in all different kinds of religions everywhere, and every kind of ideology as well. However, whenever there's excessive self-impulse and a proclivity to impulsively make decisions, you usually see that self-gratification is not of value toward that culture or society that is being propagated. So and usually these kinds of societies fail in the long run. Another strategy is to resist materialism, accepting what cannot be changed. This is one that a lot of people have a very difficult time with. Even if they can intellectually understand it, the spiritual integration of that is oftentimes very challenging for people because they don't exactly know how to let things be. And it's because we do want to have control over certain things. We want to make sure that we are avoiding pain. I mean, humans usually have two modes of being. They're running toward pleasure or they're running away from pain. And when you can accept the pain and you can accept the pleasure as it comes, but you're not necessarily seeking either one, that's what the Stoics are really trying to accomplish here with their philosophy. Refusing to see yourself as a victim and to live with nature, not opposed to it. This kind of goes in line with what I was just referring to and talking about. The main goals of Stoicism is to, number one, be satisfied with the current situation that you're in, and number two, maximize positive emotions and minimize negative emotions. It's pretty simple. It's very straightforward. I think this is one of the reasons why Stoic philosophy is so magnetic towards a lot of different kinds of people, is because the concepts are simple and it's very reasonable and rational. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be satisfied with your current situation, or why wouldn't you want to maximize positive emotions and minimize negative emotions? Now, what that looks like and how that works, that's something completely different. But any questions on this before we move on? Any thoughts as well?
No, they are wise advices. I read some of these once in a while so that it reflects, it gets imprinted into the mind. Um, like, focus on things. That's one thing I always reflect on is focus on things that are within our control and don't be preoccupied with things outside our control. Um, don't get obsessed with it. Um, I many times with 5 family members too, so um, they are wise advices actually.
Hmm.
Oh, what chapter is that actually, Thaddeus? So I know you were going through these, and these PDFs are going to be available, right? We have to revise it after the class.
Yeah, everything is available in the class. So if you just go to the classroom here in SKOOL and you scroll down to Legends of Stoicism, everything will be available there for you.
Okay.
Um,
I will revise it later today or in the weekend. Thank you.
yeah. Philip?
Thank you.
Yeah, what's amazing when you study philosophy, it's like you look through the Bible, it's like Proverbs, all the different parables, different stories. It's like not looking at yourself as a victim. I mean, like Epictetus, he was a slave. Joseph, his brothers sold him into slavery, and then he ends up becoming the prime minister of Egypt. You see it throughout, and then like the Tao Te Ching, Chinese philosophy, you see these common themes through cultures that had no connection to each other, but they all say the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good thoughts. Okay. So now we're going to be going officially into the intro to the Stoic mindset and the ancient Greek mindset, and why this is so important to understand in regard to Stoicism, because Greece was really the foundation for a lot of philosophical thought and truly the age of an ancient novelty, I would say, because Greece was just so impactful for culture. The three different kinds of societies that really seem to stand out is the Egyptian culture, the Greek culture, and then Eastern culture as a whole. Those are really the three foundational pillars in which modern society has evolved with and from. So Pythagoras here, who was a mathematician and best known for his works to contribute to the ancient Greek worldview that ultimately led to an influence in Stoic philosophy, he was born around 570 BC and died around 490 BC. And he was the one that created, I'm sure everybody's heard the Pythagorean theorem before. Has anybody not heard of the Pythagorean theorem? I'm pretty sure like everybody has. So obviously this is the whole a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And geometry was actually very, very important in regard to studying philosophy. In fact, in the school of Socrates, Plato, the student of Socrates, he actually did not want anybody to even study philosophy until they had mastered geometry, which I thought was very interesting. And in fact, I had another class in college where we talked about this. There was also a philosophy of law class that we did, and it was talking about how there were so many different kinds of mathematicians and ways of moving in the world scientifically, that to jump through the hoops of geometry and science and go straight to philosophy was actually considered to be almost maniacal in, as far as a mindset goes. It was definitely not something that people looked on with, specifically intellectuals and scholars, didn't look upon it with grace. So, is that you typing, Rama?
No,
Who's typing? Okay.
It ain't me.
it might be me. I was not on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just, it was just kind of, the background noise was a bit much.
Usually I put on mute very carefully. I'm sorry.
That's
Very
okay.
carefully.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So, the ancient Greek perspectives and terms that we want to go through, definitely to lay the foundation, is going to be, oh, well, we're going to go through quite a bit. We're going to get through as much as we can. But I have the most important things that I want to talk about first, and that I think is going to be necessary first. So the first one is pathos, so passions. Pathos is the ancient Greek term. It is often seen in regard to the negative because it causes errors in reasoning and moral action. You could translate the term pathos to mean emotion, since it can be noted that there are some weaker everyday emotional attachments that were seen to be damaging to the Greeks. The emotions that are thought to be reduced to four general responses. And these passions include, number 1, appetite, 2, fear, 3, pleasure, and 4, distress. And so typically you'll hear, whether anybody is trying to make an argument or people are in debates or anything like that, you might hear the term, oh, you know, their pathos is this, or their ethos is this. That's going to be very common in the more sophisticated parts of society, or these kinds of debate type scenarios and all of that. So passions or pathos, pathos is going to be the term that we're going to use. Stoics are not necessarily akin to participating in the implementation of any kind of pathos. They want to focus more on the logos and the ethos of something. So this is universal reason, is what the logos is. And the Stoics believed that the cosmos was ordered and rational. Okay, the logos was, it was not necessarily a person or a thing that you could relate to. It was more a force of nature that was reasonable and rational in nature itself. So, for example, in Christianity, the logos could be associated with the Holy Spirit. Now, I'm not saying that that's exactly what it is, and that's what the Stoics would agree with, but that is a compare and contrast that you might see in universal reason. Because in most religions, no matter who it is, God is a reasonable, omnipotent and omniscient being most of the time. or there are gods and goddesses that participate in the universal reason of life itself, such as the Greeks thought that the ancient Greek philosophies and mythologies were like Zeus, for example, or Hades. Obviously, these characters that were gods and goddesses had particular modes of being in the world that they controlled. There were certain domains. Poseidon was of the ocean, Zeus was of the skies and thunder, right? So different gods had different powers, and so people would pray to different gods in accordance to what they were trying to pray for. But no matter what, the Stoics believed that God was a reasonable force of nature. And in fact, Socrates was one of the first philosophers of ancient Greece to come out and say that, God is there's only one God. That's what Socrates, one of the things he died for, according to Plato's works that we have that are in memory of Socrates. So this was something that was also very new for the ancient Greeks, but philosophers and mathematicians like Pythagoras really were able to set the tone for how geometry plays a part in thought and life itself and being. So we have a couple examples here. So like Heraclitus was a pre-Socratic philosopher, not necessarily a Stoic, but he saw the logos as a fundamental law of change. Now, something interesting to take note of is that the word logos in Greek is translated to word. Okay, so Christianity actually adopted the term in the Gospel of John. So in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. So something to take note of as well. That's just a fascinating comparing and meandering between societal cultures and functions. So then we have the ethos, which is basically the character. So any time that you have an ethos, whether it's in your business or your the academy that we have, the Regal Change Academy, the ethos is the particular kind of character. So, for example, here in the Regal Change Academy, the men were hoping to and building godlike savages that are competent, responsible, reasonable, and respectful. And then we have the women that we're hoping to build to be warm, inviting, feminine, empathetic. This is an ethos. Okay, this is an example of an ethos. And so in Stoicism, ethos relates to the more character or the virtuous living. And then the living according to reason and virtue is what shapes one's ethos. And a Stoic's ethos is built on wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Virtue in of itself is really the ethos, ethos. Most people pronounce it ethos. That's the technical term. A lot of English people might pronounce it ethos. But anyway, just a side note there. So that's going to be something that we'll be looking at as we read through Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Is, did they have a pathos? Or how did they see the logos? And what was their ethos according to their philosophy? All right. So Aristotle's three modes of persuasion are based off of the pathos, logos, and ethos. This is what makes up the three modes of persuasion in itself. So an ethos will be the appeal to a credibility or the credibility of the character, whereas the pathos is the appeal to emotion. Then logos is the appeal to logic and reason. So you'll see this often in politics, for example. A lot of politicians will use pathos or apathos to appeal to an audience. And these are going to be more likely the communists, these are going to be the legitimate fascists, okay? They're actually appealing to emotions of the people. Whereas ethos is going to be a little bit more, I don't want to use the term necessarily conservative because it's not necessarily applicable to modern day, but somebody have their hand raised?
Would it be compared to character, ethos character? Because I think that's what you said earlier.
Yeah. So if you appeal to the ethos of somebody, you're appealing to their values or principles. And usually it's going to be the conservatives of any kind of political organization that are going to do that. They're going to use an ethos or they're going to use the logos. You'll find a lot of demagogues. For example, anybody that doesn't know what a demagogue is, it's basically it's not quite a tyrant, but it's somebody that uses the emotions of the people to gain power. And so demagogues use a pathos. They don't use logos or ethos more often than not. But tyrants will all automatically use a pathos. Why? Because they need fear. They value fear more than respect. Whereas, let's take, for example, like a good king. Yeah, Daniel?
I mean, this came to my mind. I feel like that's Trump. He has a kind of, he uses pathos in a lot of his rhetoric.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, that's something that I've seen personally with Trump. I mean, a lot of different kinds of people in power do that kind of stuff. Yeah, Philip?
Yeah, all politicians do that. So when you understand, what your ethos and pathos and logos and all that stuff is, it makes it a lot easier to see through the propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Caleb?
Yeah, I find it interesting. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I find it interesting too how it's with like in marketing, pathos or sorry, logos and what's the emotional one?
Ethos.
Ethos, yeah. So ethos and logos are how marketers will direct their messaging towards either females or males. So if it's a female in marketing, they'll appeal to the emotional side, whereas for males, they're more in general to appeal to logic and reason. So if you're working out, do X number of sets, take this protein drink. It's very logical. But for females, it's about think about how you're going to feel when you put on that dress, when you buy that handbag, all these things. So it's so fascinating how these are natural laws that even apply to us as two genders. It's pretty fascinating, but that's just kind of a thought I had.
Yeah, good thoughts. Yeah, I mean, something else that I just thought about as you were saying that is even like pastors or any kind of religious leader, they're more than likely going to use a pathos or an ethos to really get the people involved. A lot of times using logos to try to persuade people, especially if they're trying to feel something instead of just trying to reason through something, it's not going to work. Like trying to use a logos in seduction, for example, any kind of form of seduction, you're likely going to fail. Because anytime you use logic and reason to try to lure somebody in with seduction, or they're trying to lure you in, it's never going to be through logic and reason. It's going to be through a form of pathos or an ethos. Yeah, Rama?
Yeah, but third is, but ethos is on a higher platform. It's about maintaining good character and moral principles and then persuade. And so that's probably the right approach, right? We all want to pursue, right?
Yeah. Ideally using a ethos or a logos to persuade somebody or to convince somebody of something is going to be far more appealing than the pathos, because the pathos is usually seen as negative because it causes error in reasoning to moral action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good thought. Daniel?
Yeah, I found it interesting how you say there's a negative aspect to pathos, because how I learned in school was that, especially when writing persuasive essays, you want to use all three attributes, pathos, ethos, and logos, to persuade. So, meaning that none of them are technically negative. They all have positives, but it's 33% of each, all combined to make one great argument to
Well,
persuade.
yeah. I mean, that's a good point. But also think about, like, where does the term, like, pathos or pathology come from? Logic, logos, ethics, ethos. So there's certain phrases and certain terms that we're using that are derived from cultures like ancient Greece, for example, in this case. So, yeah, it's definitely true that, using these three modes of persuasion is going to be good, but there is there could be a negative to all three of these.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think all of them could be negative, because if a person is just too logical, like they're not attractive to the masses. Like there are a lot of intelligent people in this world, specifically like those people that work on, let's say, these blockchain technologies and whatnot. A couple names that come to mind are Charles Hoskinson or Vitalik Buterin. But these people could never be in positions of power because they're just too logical, and people aren't attracted to just logic or to just one of these forms. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Philip?
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, Daniel, because when you have people, if all three of these are out of balance, bad things can happen. That's a good point you bring out about certain people being so logical that they can't be in positions of power. It's because they only think one way. If you try anything that involves ethos or logos, they're just not going to get it, or pathos, I should say. So you have to have a balance of all three, or you just have a very warped way of thinking.
Correct.
Yeah, good thoughts. So, ataraxia. Has anybody heard this term before? Has anybody ever heard this term, ataraxia? Okay. So, ataraxia, you can think about this as the equivalent to enlightenment, okay, as far as the Eastern philosophies go. So, the highest good for the ancient Greeks and the Stoics was inner peace and tranquility. And ataraxia, you can look at the definition and the term meaning to be free from disturbance. So when a person achieves ataraxia, they accept what is outside their control, they focus on only what they can change, they align their will with the logos, and they practice virtues consistently in all circumstances. So that is something that all the Stoics and the philosophers, some people, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of the Philosopher's Stone, but ataraxia and the Philosopher's Stone is also usually seen as one and the same thing. So then there's some other terms. How much time do we have, actually? We have 9 minutes? Okay. So we've got other terms here to go through. The sage or the sophos. So the sophos, you can think about this as the archetype of a person of moral or intellectual perfection who did not experience any pathos at all internally. They actually were able to let go of all pathology. Okay? So in practice, this was seen as a highly unlikely goal to be attained because obviously the goal of Stoicism is to move as close to the sage archetype or the sophos as possible. And the standard was actually so high that the Stoics never really even knew if anybody was capable of even reaching such a state. The only people that they could think of that could possibly have gotten to that state of mind was Socrates, among other philosophers. But I'm sure Socrates is going to be the one that probably resonates, or at least is heard about from most people. Socrates is definitely the wise old man, and this is where the archetype of the sage really comes into play. For everybody that was in the Maps of the Psyche class last week, or if they've gone to look at the Maps of the Psyche class video that was posted there, you'll remember that we talked about archetypes and how these are basically personalities that are fighting for dominance inside your psyche. Well, so the Stoics didn't necessarily phrase it like that, but they saw that you were to manifest and be the vessel of the sage itself. So being a vessel, you can think about this as a guru, but as far as the philosophers are concerned, it's a sage. So then we have the term ascesis, which is healing or remedy. And this was a way of life that was transcending more of the other different kinds of archetypal themes. So this was more of a theme of how to heal people through words, or it's basically the ultimate form of therapy for the ancient Greeks and their philosophers therein. So this was a law of virtue that was not necessarily to be only aesthetic, but also to be something that equips you with ways in which you can be a form of happiness in of itself. So again, there's this continual theme of letting go of who you are to become something for the vessel of life. We also have the term apatheia, which is apathy. This is where apathy comes into play. Obviously, if you wanted to reach the sophos, then you had to let go of apatheia. So letting go of apathy in a world that is constantly trying to bring you down is very difficult, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it cannot be transcended in of itself. Like you cannot just, you can transcend apathy. We also have eupathos or eupathia, which is essentially all of the different kinds of qualities that a sophos would possess. So this is the sage that has no appetites and neither has wishes, but is a vessel of kindness, generosity, warmth, and affection. So these were also things that the Stoics were very, they were highly criticized for their coldness to life, it seemed like on the outside, but their rebuttal to that was that, no, we're trying to be joyful in a different kind of sense. We're replacing these negative cravings with virtuous actions. And then finally, we have natural affection and love. So even though love wasn't necessarily described or defined as an emotion, it is a sense that the sophos or the sage would have. So the sage would rationally, naturally wish well for mankind, since all people exist to work together. But the Stoics saw that clinging love was very wrong. And in fact, one could only freely give love when one knows not how to cling. In fact, it's almost as if you had to forget how to cling to love, because to cling to love would be to miss the point. And this is something that you see in a lot of Eastern philosophies as well, is to try to cling to enlightenment or attain enlightenment, that's to miss the whole point. So, that is a brief introduction to everything that we'll be going through in Seneca's, Epictetus's, and Marcus Aurelius's books in the upcoming weeks. As far as the task goes for next week, I will let you all know in the SKOOL community when it is available. And again, you'll be able to just go to this module, scroll all the way down until you'll see the resources, and you'll see week task 2 there, just like how there's week task 1 here. We will be reading all of The Shortness of Life by next week. And with all that being said, any other questions before we begin to sign off?
Praise ya.
Amen.
Yeah, it was a good one. Good session. Good materials. Good presentation. I wish we had more attendees.
Yeah. That's okay.
I was gonna ask how the Stoic philosophy, like how it started at the beginning, but I was gonna do that afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caleb?
No, I was just going to say I'm super excited for the Stoicism is awesome. It's like I read The Shortness of Life for the first time, like here or about pre the call, and I was like, dang, I'm like having an existential crisis. Like as you're reading it, that's the beauty of these texts. Like they're so profound, it causes you to question and think about your day-to-day actions. So yeah, it's really good reflection.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and Rama also, like with the attendees, I mean, this is going to be a specific class, and it's sometimes better to have these class series a little bit more smaller, I would say, because you get more out of it for sure. And the conversations that we have in here it's not that the other ones are bad, because we have great conversations, but there's more depth to these we can get to. Yeah, Philip, we've got under a minute left too, by the way.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the free guide. Number 7, reframe obstacles into opportunities. That's a great one right there. When things are going wrong, stop and think, okay, there's an opportunity here.
Exactly. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you have a blessed rest of your day, and we'll talk to maybe some of you later tonight, and then tomorrow and next week.
Wait, what's happening tonight?
The fast call.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Peace out, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night.